Okay. So since we have a smallish group today, there's about 12 of us. So welcome everyone. I'm Hillary Kane. I am coming to you with this workshop as both a member of the Coordinated Campaign Committee, as well as your National Party Treasurer. So over the year, and I've been treasurer of many candidate campaigns as well. So I do know a thing or two about budgeting and finance, and I will do my best to talk about fundraising, which is not truly my area of expertise, but obviously I've done some of that as well. So since we have a smallish group here, why don't we actually go around the room and do some virtual introductions? Feel free to say, you know, who you are, where you're from, if you are a treasurer or a fundraising, you know, if you have one of these responsibilities in your job description at the state, local level or candidate level, let us know. And if you have any particular questions or things you're hoping I will cover today, that would also be great. So I'm gonna kick it over to Lou, and Lou, when you're done, why don't you just, you know, kick it to somebody else, and that way we can go around the room and not miss anyone. Lou.
Sure. Thank you, Hillary. Greetings, folks. Good afternoon. Lou Novak here from Detroit, Michigan. I'm a Michigan delegate. I use he, him, and his pronouns. I'm sort of here mostly in support of the Zoom meeting, but I am acting as the webmaster for a few campaigns and would be interested in what's the cheapest way to collect money online. And I'll pass it over to Clay.
Clay. Okay.
All righty, yes, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Clay Rembert. I'm originally from Queens, New York, but I spent a whole lot of time in Philly. So Hillary, I understand exactly what I understand what you're doing out there. At present, I am in Indiana. I am the Indiana State Green Party's communications director. And the purpose of me coming to this meeting today is to just get some more information relative to fundraising so that we could take some of these tips and skills that you've been teaching here, and we want to bring it back to our party and start to try to implement some of this stuff. And from there, I shall pass it on to Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie Abishan from Chesapeake, Virginia, and I am the treasurer for the Hampton Roads Local. So just looking for any tips, any information that will help me as treasurer. And I will pass it over to Blazin.
All right, so I'm Blazin, Virginia. No treasurer candidate or anything of the sorts. Kind of just sort of want to learn the basics of anything and just get a good firm grasp for when I am a candidate. I'll pass it over to Peggy.
Hi, I'm going to do video because I don't think you can hear me very well. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're faint.
Okay. Okay, so now you can hear me. So I've been in California for 30 years, a displaced New Yorker, like many of us out here, and involved with the Greens since 1992. Active in the national, and this is my fourth presidential convention. And so it's a new experience and somewhat irritating in some ways, and pretty cool that so many people who did not have the funds to go to conventions in the past can join us. So thank you, Hillary, and all the others that have been behind the scenes suffering and doing women's work. Is that the word? I'll pass it over to Sarah. Have you spoken?
Not yet. Hi there. My name is Sarah Dillon. I live in Terre Haute, Indiana. Hey, Clay. I am a national committee delegate for the Indiana Green Party. I also previously was on the fundraising committee for GPUS. I'm now the fundraising chair for the Indiana Green Party, so obviously I would be very much interested in this presentation. And I've been involved in the Green Party since like 2005. Let me pass it on to Ben, Michael John?
Mickle John.
Michael John, okay.
Thank you, Sarah. If you don't mind, I'm going to keep the video off because I'm a little bit ill in bed and I'm not fit for TV today. I am a candidate for state representative in Seal Harbor, Maine. My district is Mount Desert, Bar Harbor, and Lemoyne, Maine. It is basically my district is Acadia National Park. It's a very, very green district. It has not had Greens run in it very often. I am also secretary of the Maine Green Independent Party. I've previously been an elected office holder in Portland, Maine. I was the first Green elected in Portland, and I served on the school committee in 2001 to 2007. And after my election, I sort of broke the ice because another 25 Greens have won elections in Portland, Maine after my first election there. So I feel like a little bit of a blaze runner there. So my campaign it's very exciting because I'm running neck and neck with the Democrat, and I have a really good opportunity to win. And I'm looking for a way to maximize my exposure to Greens nationally to broaden my campaign. I've raised about $1,400 so far, raised and spent. I've slightly outspent both of my opponents combined, with Republicans spent $0. So I've basically outraised and outspent the Democrat by a few $100. It's a safe district and everybody knows it. The Republican will get at best 20% of the vote. So there's no spoiler in here that I have to overcome. And the Democrat will be getting the Maine Clean Elections allotment of $5,000 after the primary, which is this coming July 14th. I did not qualify because I began running right before COVID happened. And so it became impossible for me to get under Maine, under our clean elections law. If we have 60 people in the district contribute $5, we qualify for the public funding. I couldn't really go door to door and collect $5 from 60
Sure.
people in the midst of COVID. So I'm a traditionally financed candidate. So my goal is to match the amount that my Democratic opponent will get of the $5,000 for the general election through fundraising.
Okay, great. Sorry,
That's-
I'm just trying to, we now have 19 folks or 20 folks in the room. And so I just want to move things along so that we can actually hear from everybody.
No problem.
So Benjamin, thank you so much. That was great. I'm so glad you're running for office, and we're going to give you a strategy to raise that $5,000 before the end of the hour is up.
Thank you so
who do you
much.
want to pass it to? Why don't we pass it to Bradley, since Bradley, you're next on my list alphabetically.
And also we went from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, which is actually named after Portland, Maine. So I am a delegate from Oregon, my first convention. Professionally, I'm a treasurer for a 501c3 charity, and I've worked quite a bit in 501c3 charity fundraising. I've been a green voter since the late 90s, basically at various states I've lived in across the country, moving to Oregon in 2015. And really it's Trump that's inspired me to not just be a green voter, but to actually get involved this year. And so I'm glad to be here. And I'm curious to hear the connections between and differences between fundraising in a charity and fundraising for political campaigns. So I'm looking to hear more about that. And I will pass it to, hoping I'm saying her name right, Charisse in Nebraska.
Yep, it's Charisse. I am in Nebraska, kind of a deep red state. So we have a pretty small Green Party. I'm the secretary of the state party and just here trying to learn more. Hopefully we have some candidates that run locally. We've had some people that kind of checked us out and then decided to run independent or try to run as a Republican or change to a Democrat, and it's hard to win as anything but Republican in Nebraska. So we're kind of, I don't know, kind of an uphill battle sometimes.
Totally understand. Who do you want to pass it to?
Has Stephanie said anything yet?
think Stephanie did.
Oh, I came in a couple of minutes
That's all
late.
right. No worries. You could pass it to somebody else.
What about Tatiana?
That sounds good.
Hi guys. I am a delegate from New York State. Sorry, I'm on the bus, so I have on my mask. I just got off of work. I work at
No
a
worries.
food pantry. And I am on the executive committee of the New York State Green Party. I'm very curious to know if anyone has had success with YouTube ads or even Instagram ads, but generally just kind of hoping to learn something. Thanks for hosting this particular workshop.
No worries. And thank you for your service as an essential worker. Can you pass it to somebody? Or, you know what, since you're already on mute, I'm going to say that you pass it to Steve Newman in Florida. Steve, are you with us? You're still on mute if you're trying to talk.
Hi.
There you go.
I didn't know I was going to be speaking here, but
Quick introduction. That's all you need to do.
okay. Steve Newman. I'm the Secretary of the Green Party of Florida, co-chair of my county, Brevard County, Florida, the Space Coast.
Great. And who would you like to pass it to?
Has Caleb talked?
I don't think so. Caleb, take it away.
Thank you. I'm Caleb Winters from Troy, New York. I'm the chair of the Upper Hudson Green Party, which covers a 4-county region in the Capital District of New York. And looking to increase our dues-paying memberships. We do have quite a few locally for our state party and for the national party, but looking to do outreach on that. We haven't had great success when we're knocking on the doors looking for donors, and also looking to run local candidates. So looking for info about that as well. Thank you. And I'll pass it to Lou Novak.
So Lou already went?
Spoken. I apologize.
No, it's all right.
Maybe you pick someone, Hillary.
How about Michelle from California?
Hi, everybody. My name's Michelle Mashburn. I am with the Santa Clara County Green Party and the State California Green Party. I'm a coordinated council member here locally. I am a nonprofit executive. Therefore, I'm interested in the translation of budgeting fundraising from nonprofit into campaign finance. So thank you.
All right, why don't we call on Lizzie next?
Hello?
Hello.
I apologize. I wasn't listening.
Just say who you are and where you're from. That's it.
Okay, hi. I'm Lizzie, Duval County Green Party Chair here in Jacksonville. I was just on the phone with Michael O'Neill because there was a typo in my email and I should be getting my Lumio invite any minute.
Oh, thank goodness that's getting fixed. So, all right, fabulous. Thank you, Lizzie. How about Mimi?
Hey, I'm Mimi Newton. I'm with the County Council of Marin County, California. A delegate for the presidential convention, my first national convention. I'm a co-coordinator of the Green Party of California. And I have absolutely no interest in financial issues, which is why I'm forcing myself to pay attention to this today.
Well, thank you for going outside your comfort zone. Why don't we hear from David Hahn?
Hi, my name is David Hahn. I'm a county council member of the Green Party of Santa Clara County, and I'm here to just learn more. I have taken on the responsibility of being treasurer as well recently, so I'd like to get some ideas and tips for fundraising like everyone has been discussing. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's try to run through these. Of course, when I said, oh, what a great idea to do a room of introductions, there was only 12 people in the room, and now we've had 25. John Schmidt, why don't you tell us who you are? All right, maybe John can't unmute himself. Joshua Gonzalez from California.
Hello?
Hello, I hear you, Joshua.
Oh, hi. I'm coming from 93631 in California, Kingsburg, California. TJ Cox, my representative, and to the left is Devin Nunes. Little area where I'm at, highly agriculture. Just look forward to the convention tomorrow, and would like to see a real campaign against Joe Biden and Trump. One where we really glass both of them, and I want to be a part of that.
Great, thank you. John, I see that you're off mute. Why don't you go?
Yes, excuse me for that. I'm a member of the California delegation and live in Stanislaus County. And being of the original baby boomer generation, my goal is to learn as much as I can to help others in their effort to change our political system.
Great, thank you. I see my Pennsylvania colleague Kelly Kuzumchak has introduced herself in the chat. She is the treasurer for, I think, her local party in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, and also Jay Walker's campaign for state representative. Michael Cooper from Indiana put in the chat that he cannot introduce himself at the moment because he is doing this call from work. So I think we all know a little bit about squeezing in our Green Party work on top of our day jobs. Let's keep going and get to Kyle in Oklahoma. Have we heard from you?
Briefly, I'm Kyle Gregory. We're restarting the Oklahoma Green Party. It went dormant for a little while. I am lucky enough to be a delegate. I previously worked on some campaigns in Arkansas, but I have no finance background or fundraising background, so here I am.
Great, welcome. All right, I see Nina.
I think Nina has left the call.
Oh, no, I'm here. Hi, I'm Nina. I'm in Yakima, Washington. I'm part of the Mid-Columbia Green Party, and I'm an alternate delegate. And I just want to learn more.
Great. All right, Nick Blessing. And maybe Nikhil Ananda, you want to go next? Where it's super early in the morning, I'm sure. All right, we have neither Nick nor Nikhil Ananda. I think we mostly have gotten to everyone except for...
Wow, can you hear me now?
Oh, I can, great.
I don't know why it didn't...
That's all right.
Okay. Yeah, good, yeah, so thank you, Hillary. Oh, I see what's going on, got it. It's locked on you. All right, I'm Nikhil Ananda. Hillary's right, it's 2 o'clock in the morning here. No, it's 7 o'clock, I'm still asleep. And this is great because I was experimenting with the, it's not, so for some reason it's not coming up, sorry about that. Anyway, I was experimenting with the green screen and I worked on it for a couple of hours yesterday and it wasn't working and I just woke up, walked into the room, hooked it up, and here it is. So I'm here, I've been a Green since 1992. I'm the Hawaii delegate reporter. I just had my dog just came to say hello to me. I just find money raising is the most difficult item of campaigning. I have stood for office 10 times, and each time it's been the hardest thing for me to do. I have little problem in talking and talking about issues. I've been a Green, like I said, since '92. The Green Party was the first state to get a Green in a partisan race, and I could go on, but I'm going to stop now. Thank you, Hillary. I'm still, as you can tell, and this is going to be a challenge
No
to
worries.
get an hour earlier tomorrow. Thank you.
That's no worries, no worries. All right, I think we have Juniper and Dan A, and then we're done. And I'm gonna cut it off because at some point we gotta start this thing.
Hi, this is Juniper. I live in Houston, Texas, and I've been donating for a few years. Now
Thank
I
you.
want to get very involved. Thank you.
Great. Dan A., are you there? Or Nick Blessing?
Hi, yes, I'm here. I'm a Green. I've been registered in California.
What did you just do?
All right, we're gonna mute Nick and not hear from him and his dog. Okay.
So very briefly for me, I'm a Green. I've been registered in California, and yeah, I'm just here to learn.
Okay, great. Okay, we're gonna get started, and apologies if we didn't get to you. Just put your stuff in the chat box. I just wanted to hear sort of who you are, where you're from, and if there was anything particular that you wanted to learn from this session. So we are gonna cover 3 main topics, and I like to think of them in succession. So budgeting ideally happens at the beginning. It's the planning phase. Fundraising is in some ways the middle, the doing phase where you're actually bringing in the money. And then the campaign finance piece is the reporting. And while that technically happens throughout the cycle, not just at the end, it's sort of like, you know, after you've raised money and spent money, then you got to tell the authorities what you did. So in some ways, I like to think of it, you know, in that way, as sort of beginning, middle, and end, and all of these things are linked together. So money matters, right? Like that's the biggest takeaway. I know as Greens, this can be really challenging because, you know, we like to say, oh, no money in politics. But I think really we were saying no big money in politics, no corporate money in politics, no undue influence because of money in politics. But the idea that we're going to have just no money at all is pretty, unrealistic. And so, you know, money matters. Seriously, it does. And, you know, in order for us to get our message out, in order to communicate with the largest number of potential voters that we possibly can, we need money in order to do that, whether we're putting ads on television, radio, the internet, YouTube, Instagram, whatever, creating literature, putting things under people's doors, putting stuff in the newspaper, telling people that we exist and that they need to take us seriously, unfortunately, requires money. And so we need to figure out a way to budget for it, raise it, and then report it. All right, so budgeting. So budgeting is important. Like I said, it is a planning tool, but it is only a plan, right? It is not necessarily carved in stone. It can change, but it's something that will help you figure out what kind of money you need to raise, for what purposes, how much of it, and then how you want to spend it appropriately. So your budget is typically both an income side and a spending side. So how are you going to raise the money? As a candidate, you might think, how much am I going to contribute myself? That doesn't mean that you have to contribute tons and tons. We're not talking like self-financed campaigns with thousands and thousands of dollars. But, you know, if you believe in yourself and you really think that your message is important and you're going to be calling other people to ask them for their financial support, you should probably think about giving some of your own money as well. Whatever is a meaningful contribution for you, there's really no dollar amount that matters. It's mostly, I think, more the symbolic gesture. So really thinking about how much money do you need to raise from a variety of sources, and then how much do you need to spend? You know, what are you going to spend your money on? What are your campaign goals, and how do those goals translate into the kind of work that you're going to be doing? And so something that I talked about yesterday in my running for office overview is that, you know, there's different kind of goals for running for office. And so obviously a key one is to win, right? To win and get power and be the elected representative that puts Green Party values and our platform into practice. Running to win, if you actually have a shot and the numbers work in your favor, might mean that you're investing money into literature and advertising, and in some ways a lot of very traditional things that help voters and likely voters hear your message. On the other hand, if you're running for something that you know statistically it's very unlikely you're going to win, let's say, you know, Senate, governor, one of those, you know, sort of bigger races that we have yet to crack, maybe your real goal is actually just building the Green Party and building recognition that we exist, building sort of, you know, brand identity, getting more people into the party, building locals in new places that had never had one before. And so maybe instead you're going to put your money into, you know, grassroots organizing, door-to-door canvassing, a field operation. You know, maybe you're going to focus on neighborhoods that traditionally had never voted in the first place. And so think about how your goals lead to the types of activities that you're going to want to do. And then, of course, think about, well, what do those things cost? And that helps you create your budget. The other thing you want to think about is what can you get in kind? And as Greens, we're usually great at this. So these are things where you get the items donated to you rather than getting the money and then you go buy the item. And so, you know, we've had, you know, in-kind donations of graphic design, of accounting services, of various things. One thing that I might be skipping ahead to a finance thing, the general rule is if a random person is a volunteer and they give their time, that's not considered a financial in-kind donation. But if somebody gives their time for a professional service that they normally would charge for, then that does count as in-kind donation. So for example, if I am a regular person, and in fact, I happen to be a nonprofit administrator in my day job, but I am not an accountant. So all the time I spend basically doing bookkeeping for the Green Party is just, I'm just a volunteer. But if I were a CPA and I normally would bill somebody $100 an hour for my services, if I then do 5 hours worth of in-kind service for your campaign, the campaign needs to count that $500 as a donation. And so just keep that in mind, because when it comes to things like campaign finance limits, whether they're self-imposed or imposed by the government, if you say that you're not going to take more than $2,500 from any one person, you better make sure that accountant only does 25 hours worth of work. But I think I'm digressing. So anyway, budgeting is a plan. I'm going to show off a sample budget here, and it might mean I have to do a different share here. But one of the things that I like to do is try to do like a 3-tiered budget, sort of a low, medium, high. So if things are just kind of puttering along and we're not raising loads of money, like this is how we're going to prioritize. You know, the mid-range is sort of if things are going decently well, here's how we're going to spend our money. And then if things really take off and we start bringing in a lot more money than we ever thought we would, this is how we would spend it. And so if I click on this link and hopefully do a new share here, this happens to be a sample budget that actually Lynn Serpy, who is one of our convention planners, put together for Sherry Honkala's campaign in 2011 when she ran for sheriff, and I was her treasurer then. To be honest, I don't know that we actually use this budget, but it's a great sort of, you know, visual of what that sort of low, medium, high looks like. In Philadelphia, we do not have any kind of public matching funds, so this line would be totally irrelevant for us. But so again, you know, it's very context specific. Every jurisdiction is different. Ben in introductions was talking about public financing in Maine. We do not have anything like that here in Pennsylvania. So just know that depending on, you know, the local rules, you may or may not be, you know, sort of adding those as potential sources of income for your campaign. But, you know, this is just also a good overview of the kinds of things that you could be spending money on. You know, if you have a really small jurisdiction, you're running for, you know, school board in a small town, you may not need, you know, any kind of paid staff, but I think in general, across the board, in my experience, Green Party campaigns are way understaffed and do not operate at even, you know, a level of professionalism and seriousness that I think we need to start really stepping into. And so I'm gonna, you know, argue that you do wanna have some paid staff. Now, we're not talking like full-blown salaries with health benefits and the whole 9 yards. It might be just a stipend for 20 hours a week, but something, because, you know, if you saw my presentation yesterday, there are a dozen moving parts in a campaign. It very much can be like a full-time job. And if you're doing everything by volunteers, it can just, people will really burn out, and you're not gonna last all the way to November, which is what you need. So these are just, you know, whether it's staff or, you know, fundraising is an expense, you know, you might need computers, websites, you know, yard signs, whatever. All this stuff costs money. And again, having this sort of like 3-tiered budget is a great approach. So So that's a sample budget, and I'm happy to share that with anyone, though like I said, I don't know that we actually used it. And at this point, it's almost 10 years old, so I can't vouch for any of the figures in that budget, but I just wanted to show off an example. All right, so a budget, as I said, is a plan. You know, I will argue that you should try to stick to your plan, particularly, you know, if it's certainly well thought out at the beginning, and it really speaks to the goals of your campaign, as I said at the beginning. You know, really think about your goals, have your goals drive your activities, and that those activities drive your budget. But it is only a plan. So, you know, at least try to, right? You know, it can change, right? There's no rule. It's not written in stone. For those of us in the nonprofit fundraising world, I happen to work also a lot with federal grants. And, you know, you tell a funder, like, I'm going to spend your money this way, this way, this way. And if you want to change it, it is a major production. You know, not so, right? In the campaign, you can just change your budget, right? It's not a big deal, but I would encourage you to not just do so willy-nilly, but really think about it and have some systems and decision-making structures in place for when you do that. Because plans can change, right? So, you know, if you have better than expected revenue, that's certainly a reason to change your plan. And of course, if you have less than expected revenue, that's a reason to change your plan. The other, you know, so obviously if that's happening, you're going to want to spend some more time and money on fundraising. And yes, unfortunately, fundraising does cost money in most cases. You might need to scale back expectations. You obviously want to be committed, you know, careful about committing to fixed costs like staff. You know, obviously I don't think anybody's doing in-person offices right now in COVID times. But in normal times, I had Sherry's campaign in 2011, we did have a campaign office in the final months, and that was a regular fixed expense that actually kind of became problematic for us. So, you know, definitely make sure that your budget is realistic and in line with what your resources are. And then of course, you also want to make sure you're saving money for the final stretch. Expenses do tend to ramp up towards the end of the campaign. There's certainly way more pressure to be able to put out literature and people on the street to get the work done in October and early November than there is, let's say, now in July. And, you know, you want to make sure that you haven't burned all your resources out in the summer and that you do have something left over for the final stretch. The other thing I think that's important about budgeting, and again, going back to that goal setting, is that, you know, when campaigns go hot and heavy, there can be a lot of, you know, last minute demands for money. Like, oh, you know, this guy just, you know, came out of nowhere and he seems really great and he's like an awesome graphic designer and like we should really pay him for this flyer. You know, I've just seen a lot of that kind of like, you know, in the moment, you know, sudden emergency expense. And, you know, it can be, there's a lot of pressure, I think, to sometimes make good on those things. But if you can go back to your budget and say, well, that just isn't in the budget, it can be a way to sort of put those, you know, seeming emergency things aside without hurting people's feelings too much. So it's a way to also, like, you know, as treasurer, because sometimes you get a lot of pressure to spend money on things that maybe you don't think are all that great, to say like, well, you know, that just really isn't in our budget right now. We were planning to do X instead. So that is another reason why I love to have a really good budget. All right, fundraising. So switching to now the doing. So the candidate is your fundraiser in chief. And I'm serious that unfortunately, that is really what the candidate should be best at. And the candidate is going to be your best asset in terms of fundraising. People love to hear from the actual candidate. You know, and that's just the reality. And it's a lot of dialing for dollars. And so, you know, this is your best fundraising tool as a candidate. You have a contacts list. And if you're like me, you have at least 100 people in it. And you're going to call every single one of those people and you're going to ask them for $100. And not everyone will give you the money, of course, but a lot of people will, and you'd be surprised. You know, people will, maybe they can't give you 100, maybe they can only give you 50 or 10, but I'm telling you, you've got to call your, you know, your cousin. You want to call the person who cuts your hair. You want to call your, you know, kid's babysitter from 3 years ago. It doesn't matter. People who know you personally, and you tell them, I'm running for office. I'm trying to become the next state representative or the next school board member or the next whatever, whatever. And generally speaking, if they like you, they will give you money regardless of what they think about the Green Party, about our platform, etc. You know, I always joke that my very Republican father-in-law would happily write me a check if I were running for office, even though we pretty much agree on nothing. But, you know, I'm his daughter-in-law and he loves me and he wants to see me succeed. And so, you know, really you have to put yourself out there. You have to make the case. So Ben, I think if you can call 100 people and ask them for $100 each, and particularly tell them that you're trying to raise that $5,000 in order to match your Democratic opponent, I think you would get it, and I think you would get closer to the 10,000 rather than the 5,000. And I'm going to say that you want to do this early. I'm going to go back. You want to do this early if you can. So if you're already running for office this year, you know, maybe this isn't early, but if you're thinking about next year, you know, this is the way you want to build your early campaign war chest, so to speak, because at the early stages, no one knows who you are. I mean, unless you're already a well-known civic leader, and you know, that would be great. Only your friends and family and your acquaintances are likely to really know about you. So that's who you get money from early on. And then later, once the campaign has some momentum, and hopefully you've used that early money to sort of put your name out there, get that literature, do that door knocking. Once your campaign hopefully takes off and the broader community knows about you, that's when you're gonna hopefully start getting donations from that larger group of people. And so, you know, it's really sort of relying on friends and family at the beginning. And then the idea is that you then broaden the base and you're gonna get more donors and donations from people who don't already know you, or don't already know the Green Party, et cetera, et cetera. So almost think about it like in concentric circles, sort of like my personal friends and family, Green, you know, existing Green Party members, people have donated to the party and to Green candidates before, and then, you know, the broader community. And you know, if you think about your campaign as sort of trying to reach those three groups, you know, that I think will be a key to success in terms of fundraising. So of course you want to make sure that you have all the infrastructure in place, right? A website with a clear and easy donate button, super, super important. You want to make sure it's linked to PayPal or some other, you know, online vendor for merchants. I think someone in the chat or in the introductions wanted to know what the most cost-effective way to do this is. You know, the answer, quite frankly, is I just don't know. In my experience, they're all roughly similar in price. You know, I have the most experience with PayPal. That is what I have used for both the local candidates that I've managed funds for. National Party uses PayPal. We also use Stripe, since that's integrated with Nation Builder. And we also have a traditional merchant account. And quite frankly, I can't tell the difference. You know, the fees are slightly different, but I don't know, they all seem to take a chunk, and it's really hard to figure out what the most cost-effective way is. And then of course, you know, you want to say like, oh, well, if people write me checks, then I don't have to pay any of those fees, but you also have the time and energy of your treasurer or whoever who's actually logging all that, tracking it. And so to some degree, as annoying as it is, it's often worth paying the payment processors to sort of take that off your plate. Though interestingly, I watched, there was a piece on Newsy, which is sort of a little internet news thing that I watched through my Roku on TV at night. And they actually did a whole report on how payment processors like PayPal, like ActBlue, are just making money hand over fist now compared to even 10 years ago, because so much political fundraising has moved online. You know, it's just, and there's so many small dollar donations, and the fees are certainly a higher percentage with smaller and more frequent donations. So just one thing to think about as a donor, you know, in some ways it's better to give $20 every other month than $10 a month. because that will make the fees lower, because there's usually like a base amount plus a percentage, and that base doesn't change. And so if it's like a 20 cent per transaction, you know, that 20 cents is coming out whether it's a $2 donation or a $200 donation. We can do some more research on that for whoever was interested in payment processors. So again, early money is huge. Make sure you have a clear donate button, and always, always, always thank your donors. Please thank people. You know, I got a call from Lisa Savage a few weeks ago, directly from the candidate, asking me for money, which I gave her. And she said, you know, because I did this same kind of spiel, we did a campaign school in Maine in December that she participated in. And she said, you know, you told me to thank my donors, and I do. She has a volunteer who sends out personalized thank you cards to every single donor. And she said she's gotten comments from donors about how nice that is. And it's just another way to keep people happy and feeling great about their participation in your campaign. And it also then helps set up that person to want to give again. All right, let's cover some other things. So knowing that, you know, so phone banking and dialing for dollars as the candidate is not the only way, obviously. Email appeals certainly do work, though, you know, there's nothing that's more effective than the candidate just calling me. I probably have gotten multiple generic, you know, Lisa Savage for Senate email appeals and ignored them all, mostly because I'm not in Maine. And if I responded to every single Green Party request I got, I'd be broke. But when she called me, it was really, you know, it would have been really hard to say no. And so just keep that in mind. But at the end of the day, you are going to want to do email appeals. You know, we can give you some templates and things. You know, you really want to hype the language and really get people excited about contributing. Social media, we do not have loads of success with this at the national level. We do put out regular tweets and Facebook things asking for donations, and I don't know, we just don't get a lot that way. So I would love to hear from other people. Maybe we can have discussion towards the end about whether or not you guys have had success with that type of thing. You know, in normal times, we would have house parties and other events that might raise money. You can do these things virtually. So tonight, and last minute shameless plug for our GPUS fundraiser tonight, you know, we obviously can't be in person, but we are gonna have a fundraiser tonight, and it's already broke even and then some. And so we're selling tickets through, you know, our Nation Builder platform. We have a performer who we're paying, and it's going to be a great event, hopefully, and I think it will be. And, you know, it happened, you know, like we don't need to be together in order to do the same kinds of things that we would have done if we were together. So just keep that in mind, that you can do these things virtually, and I would encourage you to do so. And then SMS appeals would be sort of text banking. You know, there's various software and things for this type of thing. This is actually not my area of expertise. I know people use Call Hub for phone banking. It might also be available for text banking. I'm not sure. I've also used just Google Voice, which is a pretty sort of low-tech way of doing a bunch of mass texting, because it's not really a mass texting platform. So Google Voice, and actually I could just show it off. You can create, you know, essentially a masked phone number for your own personal phone number. And so, and I've used this both for work, for communicating with students, as well as for Green Party stuff. And what it allows me to do is maybe, you know, keep something in Notepad, like a standard, you know, so this was non-fundraising, but this was text banking that we sort of did before our Philadelphia presidential nominating caucus. And so we wanted to make sure as many registered Greens knew that we were having this, you know, online, we actually did vote by mail because of COVID, but that we were doing this and we were having a discussion and that the voting was happening. And so I had this, you know, stock message that we had written in Notepad, and I had a list of phone numbers, and I just copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. So it is tedious, but it's free. And it also, you know, it doesn't violate rules around mass texting people who haven't subscribed to a list, but, and it's a lot easier than actually trying to do it on your phone, at least for me. So that's another possibility. And there also are more sophisticated tools out there for true mass texting platforms. Okay. All right, make sure that when you do have people calling or emailing or texting, that they have a script and it has explicit asks. So the worst part is to do a fundraising call and you never actually ask for money, right? So, and this is the same with a house party, right? You have this great event, the candidate speaks, everybody's super excited. You have to explicitly ask for money. You can't just imply that money would be nice. You have to say, can you make a donation? Who can contribute to help so-and-so get elected in November? Can I count on you for a donation today? You know, that's the kind of language. And you pause and you wait and there's some uncomfortable silence and that's okay. And the person will either rise to the challenge or they won't. And, you know, if they do, you thank them, you give them the information on how they can donate. And if they say, well, I don't know, you say, well, you know, maybe $50 would be more comfortable for you at this time. And if they're still a little, you know, hesitant, then you can say, well, maybe you can volunteer or sign up to get more information, right? Like you're not going to browbeat someone, but you do want to sort of set the bar high and then sit back and wait. Yeah, like that. It's a little uncomfortable and awkward, but it does work. So make sure you have scripts and make sure those scripts have explicit asks when you're doing fundraising. You know, when you're doing other kinds of outreach, you know, maybe the explicit ask is like, can we count on your vote in November versus, you know, can we get a donation from you? But you want to make sure that you have explicit asks. And I would also encourage you, especially when it comes to things like email appeals and e-blasts, that you have a variety, right? Like that you send specific emails that are really about fundraising and have explicit asks for money, but then you send other emails that are more just, here's what's going on the campaign trail, here's what's happening, and they don't have any, you know, any ask, right? Don't muddy the waters. Don't ask someone to make a phone call to their senator, donate money, and volunteer all in the same email. It's too confusing. And often people will do whatever the first thing is that you ask, and then, you know, they click that link and they go somewhere else and they never get back to the original thing. So be very clear with your fundraising that this is the email that we're sending, or this is the call that we're making in order to ask for money. And try not, especially with the email, try not to include lots of other links to other things. So, you know, even if your fundraising ask is, you know, thematically tied to some current event, don't link to articles that take them off to some other website about that event. Just put, because they will get distracted. They click on that link, it takes them to CNN, they see, say like, oh, and then they never came back to do the donation. So again, really try to be clear in your emails and your communications, like this one is for fundraising and that's where the specific ask goes. And then the other one is for just general information. And then hopefully people will also be more receptive to reading all your emails. If every single email feels like a fundraising pitch, at some level, people are gonna, you know, often unsubscribe because they don't want to be hit up for money all the time. You want to also refer to what the money will go to. That usually helps drive donations. So when people hear, and if we can raise $3,000 in the next 2 weeks, that will allow us to buy 12 radio ads, for example. You know, the thing that you want to use the money for will often help get people motivated. And if there's some sense of urgency, you know, you'll see this on some of the other campaigns. In fact, we just saw this. I saw an ad from AOC talking about, you know, June 30th, the end of the quarter, our next campaign finance report is due, and we want to show that we've raised a bunch of money, right? And so any sort of real or kind of fake sense of urgency, you know, anything that you can do to sort of get people motivated to donate now is always a good thing. So, you know, if we can raise X in this amount of time, we can do Y is a great way to sort of convince people that they need to write you that check. And again, refer back to your campaign goals because that will also help. And for some donors, that will show that you really have a plan and you know what you're talking about, which is great. All right, last few slides, and then we're gonna get into some discussion. We did that already. So record keeping, now I'm switching to the campaign finance piece of this. So just know this is a little bit of Treasurer 101. Your basic job, of course, is to keep track of the money, what goes in and what goes out. You want to set up a basic check ledger, you know, a little like, you know, and I've done it, and I can even show you my local party budget here, or not budget, but our, you know, well, treasury. I mean, it's not super sophisticated. It's literally like, you know, just like an old school check ledger. And this has been through successive treasurers. I think, I don't know if I started it and then I wasn't treasurer and then it came. So since 2012, we've been using this, you know, and it's really basic. It's like a date, it's the thing, and it's the amount of money. You know, I will admit that we're sometimes a little sloppy. We do this pass the hat, and maybe, you know, $30 in cash comes around, and, you know, we can, I think, report, you know, what's the word I want? Like sort of, you know, lump sum donations like that, as long as they're under $50. So, you know, but it's not super sophisticated, but like, you know, expenditures, we spent something, we took money in, and here's our running balance, right? Like that's what we're talking about, a basic ledger. You want to have backup documentation for all your receipts and invoices. And so you want to save every bill that you get, every receipt for something that you paid in case of an audit. So in case of an audit, they say, oh, you spent $30 on X, you know, show me what that was for. And this is especially important when you're paying people, because that's really rife for, you know, basically kickbacks and corruption, right? Like, you know, I mean, you can imagine, my joke is always like, add 4 zeros to whatever it is that you're doing and imagine that the Democrats are doing it. And if it doesn't pass the smell test then it probably doesn't pass the smell test for us, right? So, you know, an example might be like, oh, you paid this graphic designer $100. Well, is there a contract? Where's the evidence? Like, let me see the design that they made, you know, show that there's some like legitimacy. So an invoice from that designer that says, you know, I made XYZ logo, $100, great. You know, and if you don't have a paper trail, you know, you can't prove that that person actually did work that was worth that money. And so again, you know, I joke, add 4 zeros, right? So, oh, you paid somebody $1 million for something, like where's the invoice? Where's the evidence of that person's work? For donors, you obviously have to keep all of their information. And so every jurisdiction is different. There's no single set of rules. So my best practice is to keep everyone's information for everything. But in many cases, like here in Pennsylvania, as I said, if it's under $50, we don't have to tie it to an individual, but it's based on the cycle. And so if somebody donates $25 in March, and then they come back and donate $25 or $25.01 in April, I now have to report both of those donations tied to that individual on my next campaign finance report, because they've now donated more than $50 in that cycle. And so for that reason, I have just found it a best practice to get everybody's information, no matter what they donate the first time around, because you never know if they're going to cross that threshold with a future donation. And usually it's name, address, name and address. Often it's also occupation and employer. And so again, consult your local campaign finance rules, talk to treasurers who have gone before you, your local and state party treasurers, find out what the rules are. Often your state or county board of election and campaign finance will have trainings and websites with information, and you got to make sure you know those rules. If you're filing at the FEC level, there's a different set of rules, but make sure you know what information you need to track, and track that from the beginning. And like you can use Google Drive and Google Sheets to do this. You know, I'm a big fan of Excel in general, but I find that for transparency, when I'm a treasurer, I like to do it in Google Sheets and then share that with only like, you know, either our steering committee or, you know, the inner circle of your campaign, whoever needs to know, because, you know, God forbid you get hit by a bus or whatever, you know, something happens. You don't want all of that information to just sort of be lost. All right, again, reporting. Every jurisdiction has different rules, but you need to know what it is that you're expected to report on. In my experience, every single expenditure has to be tracked and reported on, no matter how small. So there's no equivalent of the sort of $50 rule on the expense side. You need to know what your reporting deadlines are. So here in Pennsylvania, you know, the county party or the state party generally only has to report once a year, sort of an annual report. But once you start spending money to influence an election, which could be if the county chapter donates to a campaign or the candidate themselves, then there's different dates that are based on the election. And so, for example, for a November election, we would often have to finance sort of like a pre-primary report, I think 6 weeks, or not pre-primary because we're not in the primary, but a pre-election report like 6 weeks before. So that might be like end of September. And then there might be like a 1 week before report. And then I think we have these things called 24-hour reports where if you get over like a certain amount of money, like the day before the election, so 24 hours, you have to report that within 24 hours. So if you get like a huge, like, you know, $1,000 donation or more in the last, you know, couple days of the campaign, you have to report that immediately. There's all kinds of different rules, and it's often different than the party itself. And then there's sort of post-election reports, and then typically a year-end report. So just know that there's lots of stuff to keep track of. So that's what I mean by campaign donations may trigger additional reports. And usually there's software to help you do all this. I mean, you know, I have never just filled out a PDF manually. With FEC reports, there's a software called FEC File, and you basically just log all your stuff, you know, into a database. You can also import transactions from Excel if you have lots of them. At the county level, they have a software that they created in Philadelphia. And interestingly, for a long time, Pennsylvania did not have a software, but they would accept the Philadelphia software, you know, the report that the Philadelphia software spit out. And in fact, the Philadelphia software was designed so that when you hit publish, it printed the state, what the state wanted, because in many cases you have to file with both the county and the state at the same time. So just make sure that, again, you want to be familiar with the rules and regulations, and usually it's the County Board of Election or the State Board of Election Campaign Finance Division that will have this kind of information for you. You also want to, you know, it's not just about reporting to the government, it's also about reporting to your membership, or in the case of a campaign, you know, the candidate and the rest of the team. And so you want to be also to just generally speaking, like, like track expenses against that budget that we talked about at the beginning. Like, oh, we said that we were going to spend $400 on campaign literature. How much have we spent of that already? You know, you want to be able to make sure that folks know how we're doing. What are the trends in income and expenses? Oh, this month we raised this much money. It was a little bit more than last month. Those kinds of things. And that's basically it. I mean, these are some other issues that you may encounter. You know, some of these are just more sophisticated than you'll probably need, but it's, you know, as at the national level, I've certainly had to deal with all of this. You know, getting familiar with GAAP, I think this is generally accepted accounting principles. Like I said, I'm not an accountant and I'm not, you know, a bookkeeper, but I do in my nonprofit day job manage grants and have been to a lot of trainings and sort of things about, you know, what passes the smell test. You know, it has to be reasonable and allocable, and, you know, what a prudent person would spend, those types of things. You know, you're going to want to make policies on how you spend money. Like, you know, if somebody is traveling, you know, are there limits? And so I usually just go with like, oh, well, the federal per diem guidelines say that you can get this amount of money in, you know, for meals, you know, but if you eat at the Four Seasons, sorry, that's just out of our budget, right? You know, do you want to be able to have, you know, the treasurer write checks for any amount, or if it's over a certain amount of money, somebody else has to co-sign it, those kinds of things. If there are matching funds or public financing, you have to know those rules. We've seen way too many candidates get tripped up by not doing it exactly right. I mean, I want to say that Jill herself, and I want to say when she ran for governor in 2010, that and I might have been a PayPal issue, that like the timestamp of the donation, because of course a flurry of donations came in literally the last day that it would qualify, but because the money wasn't like in her account, you know, like the money comes in the next day, like it didn't count, you know, something along those lines. So make sure that you really, really know what the rules are and that you're on track to meet those obligations. You might have independent contractors, so people who are 1099s, again, like a graphic designer, a website developer. You know, the general rule of thumb is that you have to report that to the IRS if you pay them more than $600 in a calendar year. So you got to keep track of that. Best practice is to collect a W-9 from them so that you can do this. And there's what I use, like, I think it's e-file for business or easy file for business, but it's like some website where I can file a 1099 and it costs like $3 or $4. And, you know, we don't necessarily need to use an accounting firm for that sort of thing. You want to reconcile bank statements, make sure that, you know, all the things that you think you've spent money on are the things that have actually hit the bank. You know, deal with payment processors, as we talked about. You might have merchandise, so if you have a little online store where you're selling t-shirts and whatnot, in my experience, all of that counts as a donation. You know, this is how 501c3 and political parties are a little different. So in a 501c3, and let's say you host a gala dinner and you sell tickets for $100 a piece, but the value of the meal is, let's say, $50, then only the other 50 is the donation, right? Because they're saying like, well, you got something of value back for that money. And so it's really only the extra that is the donation. Not so in a political party. In a political organization, the whole $100 is a donation, and then the party just had expenses for the food and the room rental and whatever. And none of it is tax deductible for the donor. So the donor, so to some degree, it just doesn't matter. They don't, you know, the receipt that you give them is just proof of donation, and it's for their own purposes and their own records, but you cannot claim a donation to a political party or candidate on your taxes the same way you could do with a charitable contribution. You want to make sure you have a method to track in-kind donations, and it's almost exactly the same as you would track it if you spent the money. So if somebody, you know, buys $300 of your merchandise, you know, buys the t-shirts from the printing company for you because maybe you don't have the money and they're sort of doing it as like a loan, you know, then that's, if it's a loan and it's going to get paid back, then it's a loan. But if they're just saying, you know, whatever, like, you don't have to pay me back, just count that as a donation, you need to count that as a donation, as it's almost like as if they gave you the money for all that stuff instead of paying the vendor directly on your behalf. And then, you know, you may need insurance, probably not. But, you know, if you've got, you know, we have actual, like, you know, payroll types, you know, staff. And so there's, you know, unemployment insurance and things like that. But, you know, we've also done event insurance. So in normal times when we have this convention at an actual place, like if we were in Detroit, we would have gotten a special event policy that, I don't know, $100, $150, not much. But, you know, when you're having a large gathering like that, if something goes wrong, you want to basically be covered. And I don't think we need to talk about payroll and healthcare for most campaigns. So I think that might be it. We've got a few more minutes. I know the chat box has been like blowing up. So I don't know, hopefully people are just chatting amongst themselves and giving people other advice, but I am officially done and we can open up the chat for conversation and questions, comments, ideas. I know that I'm not the only treasurer in the room. And so if there's other things that you have learned how to do and advice that you want to give, you know, or questions you want to ask, feel free.
I was wondering if you're going to have a copy of this presentation available.
Yes, I can put up the PowerPoint on the Green Party, the gpus.org website. And I can also, and we have recorded it and they will get distributed in some kind of way. So I'm not in charge of that, but I know that it will happen. In fact, I think Dave Doonan, our webmaster, is converting them to YouTube videos.
Okay.
Kelly has raised her hand.
Yes. I wanted to ask about, you mentioned independent contractors and issuing 1099s, and then you skipped payroll. No, that's okay. I just wanted to know if we do want to actually pay people on our campaign, because, well, any campaign I've been involved in hasn't done that yet, but I'm trying to get there.
Ambitious, yay.
If we're not paying them like a salary, if we're just paying them like a stipend kind of thing, would we still have to do payroll? Would we have to have them as an independent contractor? What would be the process there?
I mean, I think because a campaign is a time limited thing, right? Like it's basically a small business that starts up in February and ends in November, right? So, you know, you're gonna pay someone $300 a week or whatever, you know, is it the greatest thing in the world for the person? No, because they have to manage their own taxes and withholding, but like, you know, I would advise you to just pay them as a 1099, like we're you know, and that just as long as everyone's up front and they know what they're signing up for and they get it, like you should be fine, right? I think, you know, if you're going to keep people on the boat, you know, if you have someone who's maybe a perennial candidate, and we have a few people out there like that, and, you know, you're going to be sort of paying this person $300 a week pretty much in perpetuity because like every year, you know, we're going to run for the next thing and the next thing. I mean, I do think ethically, and not legally, but ethically, there's a question about, okay, at what point do you need to actually like handle their withholding and, you know, ideally like, you know, work to get them benefits and things like that.
Right.
So I will just say like at the national party, when I came on as treasurer, we did have a payroll system, right? So we used some local company that unfortunately just got bought by ADP last week. So I had to deal with all that transitioning payroll systems in the last week during like the height of all this. I was like, but you know, so, you know, that I inherited there, you know, like, and there's lots of payroll companies out there and you pay for, you know, you pay them the privilege of figuring all the local taxes out, right? And withholding that. But, you know, we were paying, like at the ADP, I think is a lot more money, though they have to honor our existing contract for 18 months, thank goodness. But what we were paying was something like $20 a person a month in terms of payroll services.
Okay.
But it, you know, it's just complicated and complex to set up. And, you know, if it's one person, like I said, a few $100s a week or something, like it's sort of not worth it.
Right. Yeah. I definitely wasn't thinking like large scale, like ongoing throughout the years. I was just thinking like, if you want to pay someone a stipend at the end of the campaign, like here's how much you get for working on this campaign. That would be like a 1099 situation.
Definitely.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
No worries. All right, I see 2 more hands raised. Let's take Ben first.
Hi, Hillary. Thank you for the presentation. I was curious, does the CCC have access to or any resources such as like a national donor base that they could forward information to about, you know, campaigns like mine?
So I think the answer is yes and no. So we typically don't share our donor list, even with campaigns, but we do share our donor list with state parties as long as the state party is willing to share its list back with us. And then what we have done with campaigns that we have provided financial support to, I think is a similar arrangement. So it's, you know, to be honest, it's not really like a well-oiled machine and a sort of really set systematic way that we do this. But what I think we should do is like, we should have an offline conversation and see what we can do for you. Though usually it is a bit of a quid pro quo. Like if we give you our list of everyone in your district at the end of the year, you know, we would want the list back that might have, you know, more people that you've gotten locally that we don't have, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that helps. But I was also wondering about, you know, maybe outside the district, national.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't know that we would give you a national list, but we might maybe give you like all of Maine, or I don't know. We'd have to have a conversation.
Do you have an email subscription list that if I were to send CCC information about my campaign, they could send it to the donors, so you wouldn't have to necessarily give me the donor information, but you could forward, you know, the contribution link for my campaign to your email subscription list?
So that, depending on what you're running for, and I don't remember if it was state representative or Congress.
State representative.
State representative. Okay, good. Because I think with FEC, like there might be limitations on whether or not we can do that. I mean, the answer I think is generally no, because we would get like 50 to 75 of these requests every single year, and it would just sort of like overtax our donor list. What we do, thank you, Lou, I see that 5-minute warning. I think what we do is we do have a process that the CCC controls, and it will be coming out hopefully next month, where we will ask candidates to apply for money directly from the party. And so I would encourage you to apply. It's usually a short application. The party will make a decision, like, you know, we'll get like 10 to 15 applications. We'll pick a sort of top 5, top 7. And then what we usually do, so not, in addition to just like writing you a check, we will also then do like a massive promotion where we sort of highlight, you know, like these are the top 7 candidates, you know, campaigns this year. And so definitely apply for those funds. And the fact that you have, you know, you've been elected before sort of, I think, puts you in good stead.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. And you get, if people want to contact me after this, treasurer@gp.org is the easiest way to get me. And even if it's not a treasurer question. All right, the next person I think who had a hand up, I think it was Michelle in California.
My only comment was about the 1099. Make sure you check your state requirements, because California has the no gig worker type thing. So it's important that you ensure that you're following both federal as well as state requirements. State of California, you cannot 1099 a worker unless they have their own organization, that you're kind of their own service company, and bring all of their own supplies, which with campaigning, it may or may not work. So
that's good to know. I mean, can you tell me more? Because I'm like, oh gosh, I think our graphic designer is in California and I want to make sure we're doing this right.
Feel free to reach out to me. You know, and I can send you the basic ABC checklist that helps define what that is.
Right.
So it's just kind of a, or I can send you an email as well. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that would be good, because I know we don't, at the national level at least, we don't have anyone that's getting like a regular stipend that we pay as a 1099 period. But, you know, like we do pay for one-off things like, oh, this person does a logo. And so you're saying they have to have their own, like, I mean, in that case, they do bring all their own supplies, right? Like we're not providing them a computer or whatever. But yeah, right. I would be really interested to see that, because that is
graphic design. I don't think would be the issue, because you're right. They can be an independent, like an artist, or doing their own thing, and they're building their own brand. But if somebody's doing office things, or, you know, the other way of doing it is to offer a stipend that is a reimbursement stipend. So it's for anticipated expenses in the execution of their duties. So there's a fine line 501c3, which I think gets transferred to the political parties as well, that if you're offering a reimbursement stipend, it's viewed slightly differently within the tax code. So
okay, good to know. All right, we have time, I think, for maybe one more question. So anyone else? All right, well, hopefully for whoever it was that said they knew nothing about money, hopefully I didn't scare you away. I will just do one more pitch that campaign treasurers are really important. And I have talked to way too many people who want to run for office and who even have started running for office, and they can't find a treasurer. And so if any of what I described did not make you run screaming for the hills and you think you can do it, you know, please consider putting yourself out there as a potential treasurer for candidates in your community, because it's a huge service and we just have too few people, you know, like we just need a deeper bench for this sort of thing. So that's it. I think I'm gonna close the recording here.